Okay, welcome to our first official genetics lesson. So, as I said, genetics is the biology unit for Science 10. Absolutely one of my favorite topics of biology, so I'm super excited about this. Main concepts that we're going to cover specifically like right now is looking at DNA structure and function, as well as genes and chromosomes. So that'll be kind of our first week or so. And then we're going to branch off and look at mechanisms of the diversity of life, so looking at mutations and looking at selection, and then we're also going to look at inheritance. So we're going to figure out kind of how this relates to us personally as well. Okay, key concepts. So when you're in class, definitely take a look at page 8 on your textbook. But also see if you can kind of figure out what those blanks might be. Your notes are a little bit more filled in than this, so that should help a little bit. Okay, these are the key terms for the unit. Okay, so main vocabulary, make sure that you've got a good understanding of what these mean. You can absolutely Google to come up with definitions for these. It doesn't need to be like out of your textbook or whatever, but just make sure that it's written in a way that you understand. So if you Google and you get some like super elaborate response, you might want to pare that down into your own thing. You also want to make sure that you're taking a look at how it applies to genetics. So specifically like looking at the word protein, we're not talking about like how much chicken did you eat for dinner last night. Okay, getting into it. So, oh, I just skipped past, you've got a couple of pages with like assigned reading, so highly recommend reading over it. It will make it easier for you to figure out those key terms and key concepts as well. Okay, so all living things have 7 characteristics of life. So they reproduce. All living things produce offspring. If it can't have babies in one form or another, it's not alive. Specifically, it needs to kind of be able to do it on its own, and that's one of the defining features. I know in Science 9 you guys looked at reproduction, both sexual and asexual, so this is tying back to that. It has to be able to do at least one of those things. Metabolism. So all living things require some form of food or energy, and they produce waste as a result of using that energy. Homeostasis. All living things require a balanced internal environment. Okay, so for humans, standard body temperature is like 37 degrees Celsius. 40 is a fever. Okay, and so you kind of need to be, or high level fever, you kind of need to be somewhere within that range. All living things respond to stimuli, means have some kind of sense of hot, cold, wet, dry, some kind of response to external stimuli. All living things grow. Okay, so you have to have cell division making things bigger. This is one that we probably haven't looked at before or specifically talked about before as far as a characteristic of life goes, but it has to have heredity and adaptation through evolution. So genetically determined characteristics of living things are passed on to their offspring, and through mutation and survival of the fittest, this may lead to evolution. This is something we'll be looking at in section, I want to say 1.3. Cellular organization, so all living things are made up of one or more cells. Okay, so ultimately it's a cell and its complex organization that allows for the evolution and diversity of life as we know it today. So the important details for this are in the nucleus of a eukaryotic cell. You might remember that a prokaryotic cell is a cell that doesn't have a nucleus. This is like throwing back to grade 8 cell biology. Okay, so every cell in your body has a specific job. Obviously, a hair cell is different than a skin cell, is different than cells in the retina of your eye. So once again, throw back to grade 8, that's looking at the very back of your eye. Obviously, these cells are different, but how do they become specialized? How do they do different things? So as I said, key to this is in the nucleus. So your cell has a nucleus. In your nucleus, you have chromosomes. In that, there's DNA, and that is what becomes really important. So the nucleus contains the master set of instructions in the form of DNA that tells a cell what it's going to do, how it's going to function, when it will reproduce, when it will grow, and when it will die. Death is a really important part of life, unfortunately. Okay, there's our nucleus again. Okay, but how? Okay, how is it sending messages to the rest of the cell to determine what it's going to do, how it's going to function, when it's going to grow, when it's going to die? Okay, so nucleus contains DNA. Okay, so super important. DNA carries the master set of instructions for cell function. Okay, there's our DNA again, right there. DNA, short for deoxyribonucleic acid, is a double-stranded helix that basically looks like you took a ladder and you twisted it. The sides of DNA are made of sugar and phosphates. So when we say we take a ladder, we're talking like ladder. Okay, and the sugar and phosphates are on the sides. Okay, so sides. Okay, and then the steps. When we say the steps, we're talking about these parts. The parts go across, like physically step one if you're climbing a ladder. The steps of DNA are made up of 4 nitrogenous, which means nitrogen-containing bases. So adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. Okay. Adenine and guanine are double ring structures that are known as purines. And cytosine and thymine are single ring structures known as pyrimidines. A single sugar phosphate base unit is called a nucleotide. So that means 1 sugar plus 1 phosphate plus 1 base. So all of those things together, this is a nucleotide. Okay. That is where the nucleic acid comes from in the name for DNA. Okay, so it's not so much that it's in the nucleus, but it's that it's made of nucleotides. So that's our nucleus aspect. Important rules. So adenine, which is our A, always pairs with thymine. Okay, and cytosine always pairs with guanine. And apple tree, car, garage. It's kind of how we remember it. A little cheesy, but totally works. Okay. So apples grow on a tree, cars go in a garage, A with T, C with G. If we look at the diagram up in the corner here, you can see that, remember, our adenine and our guanine were the double ring structures. Okay? And then the cytosine and the thymine are single ring structures. Okay? So it's always one big one paired with one little one. And then if you look between C and G, cytosine and guanine, there's 3 bonds that take place, and between adenine and thymine, there are 2 bonds that take place. So it's always one big one paired with one little one, and then the ones that form 2 bonds paired together, and the ones that form 3 bonds paired together. And that's why it's always in that order. Okay, slightly bigger picture of it here. Okay, so there's our coiled up double helix, twisted around ladder, and if you were to kind of flatten it out, here's our kind of ladder shape. So once again, we've got our G paired with our C and our 3 bonds, our T paired with our A and our 2 bonds. Okay, and then each of those bases is attached to a sugar. Okay, and then there's a phosphate in between the 2 sugars. Okay. So, not in your notes. Just take a moment to think about this. Looking at this picture, where are the bases located? Can you find the bases? If not, send me a message. Name the 4 bases. Okay, that you can go back and figure out in your notes. Where are the sugars and phosphates located? Where are you going to find them? Okay. And what is this shape called? Okay, so what is the fancy name for this twisted double helix or double ladder shape thing? Okay, the end for this video. You've got some review questions, so take a few minutes, review them. So if the bases on one strand of DNA are AT, G, GC, CTA, what's the sequence of the complementary bases on the other strand of DNA? Okay, so what's going to pair up with that? And then think of an analogy to describe the base pairs. Obviously, sharing with classmates a little bit trickier because you might be doing this totally on your own right now. But if there's anyone else online with you, go ahead and share. Basically, just kind of come up with some kind of a description that's going to maybe help you remember what's going on there.